So, the United Methodist Creation Justice movement in general is teamwork. We're all part of the team. If you're here today, consider yourself part of the team. And that team has broken up into smaller groups that do different things according to their passion, according to where they feel called. And one of those things is this movement cafe. So I'm Rashenda. I live in Southern Oregon, and I'm just glad to be here. And I also want to introduce Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt. And Kathy is an earth keeper. She lives in Minnesota, and she has been the one of the leading lights in this, one of the key organizers, maybe the key organizer. And she's her vision has carried many things, and her ability to be in relationship with not just the movement, but this idea and the people behind it, I think is just really catalyzing. And I also want to introduce Dawn Lewis. And Dawn is bi-coastal right now, and she's just awesome, bringing her passion and bringing her care for the movement. So this is that thing, right? Getting swept up into this sense that this is important, and I don't have to do it alone. So I want to turn it over to Dawn next, because Dawn is going to walk us through our shared agreements for our time together.
Thank you, Rashenda. And thank you everyone for coming. This is, as you know, our first Movement Cafe, the kickoff, and you guys having you here and helping us realize that we're not the only ones who think this is a good idea just makes it that much more meaningful. So thank you so much for coming. What I'm going to do is just really quickly go through what is kind of known as an agreement for conduct. And that's just to ensure that everybody that comes to these cafes understands this is a safe space. This is a space where we all respect each other and are just enjoying our time with each other and learning from each other. So I'm going to really quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time doing this, just go over what we would like to kind of set as our agreements. And first is that, and this falls on us, is to begin on time and end on time. We totally get everybody in here is busy and doing all kinds of wonderful things. And so we don't want to encroach on your time. So we're going to understand that's important and your time is valuable. So we will pledge to do that. Also during our meetings, we do want to take turns speaking, to listen carefully to everybody and not to interrupt those who are sharing, because our goal really is to learn from each other and appreciate everyone's experiences and perspectives, and just know that everyone's participation is valuable and our response to others should reflect that philosophy. So we want to make sure that everybody kind of adheres to that. A good way to if you want to have a turn speaking is to use the raised hand feature, because that is a great way to get attention. You can also just raise your hand, but the raised hand emoticon or feature is a good way to do that too. When you're not engaged in talking, we do ask that you mute yourselves, because sometimes we kind of get uninvited guests. I know personally, I've had a dog that was totally uninvited that totally disrupted the meeting. I'm also married to somebody who is one of the loudest people you've ever met in your life. So I do think that's kind of important, because I'm really guilty of that a lot of times, and I don't want to do anything to mess up the flow. If you disagree with something that's being said, we ask that you just ask for that to be clarified and then share your perspective in a respectful manner. And just because you just want to ensure again that it's a safe space for everyone. And as Rashenda mentioned, the meetings are going to be recorded, and that's really because we have people that may want to come and they just can't make the time. And so we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to be there or to hear what's said as well. So that's basically it. And I hope everybody is good with that. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Rashenda.
Awesome. So Kathy is going to now share a little bit more about the creation justice movement itself.
Well, and thanks, Dawn and Rashinda. It's lovely to be working on this with you. We'll talk a lot more about the overall United Methodist Creation Justice movement, which many of you have helped build it later. That's kind of what the focus of this will be. But we wanted to start out by sharing the vision statement as a way of just kind of grounding us in this new space. So as I read that, it's just a short statement. I invite you to let these words sink into you in order to begin to shape this time together. Our vision is that we seek first God's new creation of the world, in which all creatures, places, and earth systems are fully alive through loving, sustaining, and just relationships. Let me read that one more time, and again, let it sink in. We seek first God's new creation of the world, in which all creatures, places, and earth systems are fully alive through loving, sustaining, and just relationships. Welcome.
And Kathy is going to really kind of fill us in a lot more about the creation justice movement and more. So Kathy, I'm going to turn it your way.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, this is fun to be in a group setting where we're getting to know each other a little. And my goal in the next few minutes here is to help you get to know a little bit about what is emerging as the creation justice movement. Some of you have been actively involved in that. Some of you may know about this, but I haven't met you yet. But one of the things I'm really encouraged by is how many of the folks I don't know, which is really an exciting element in a movement that we're growing and that we're building connections. So to start with, I just want to acknowledge and honor that the United Methodist Church has a rich tradition of affirming creation justice, affirming our vocation of creation justice, that all of us as Christians are called to live in just relationship with each other, with God's good creation, and that the church has had words and statements to that effect and calling people to that work. However, in the last few years, in recent years, that a number of us are feeling increased urgency about that call, and we're feeling the urgency to take more action because we're awakening to the problems of climate change, of environmental injustice, and other really ecological crises and destruction. As the poll just indicated, we've been working in our communities through interfaith and public environmental movements, but as United Methodists, there's a particular call, a particular feeling that we want to move this denomination to play a bigger role, that this church that we all belong to can serve in a greater way to work for healing, restoration, and justice. And so out of that urgency, this thing that we're calling the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, that it was born. I like to say this is not really a new organization, but it's a new effort, a new network, a way to connect the many existing and emerging groups that are part of the United Methodist Church that are working in some way in creation justice. So it includes Earth Keepers, United Women in Faith, Church and Society, Global Ministries, Actions, Disaster Response, colleges, seminaries, students, camping and retreats, and so forth. It includes creation care teams in local churches, but also in annual conferences, and it includes you. So we're really glad you found us and have shown up today. And I should just say that, as those of us who have found each other, we found each other at places like conferences, at trainings, online increasingly through Zoom. As we've been talking and connecting with each other, we've been asking kind of a central question: what more might we do together? Some of the answers to that question have turned into action work teams. And I'll be talking about our website in a bit, but you can see all of the work teams that the Creation Justice Movement is offering at this moment. It has available on our website. And don't worry about this link, I will share it with you later, but there's a worship team, an advocacy team, a vocational incubator team, annual conference organizing team, a climate finance working team, a communications team, and an overall movement coordinating team. And so that's all available to dig in more deeply, and we'll be hearing from some of the leaders of those, but it's in a sense an answer to that question of what more might we do together. Organizing, advocacy, education, worship, communications, all of those things. Now, we know that we're not doing everything that could be done. And so if you have an idea of something you want to work on with other people, we welcome that. We can definitely create more work teams. And in fact, some of the work teams I just showed you are brand new and have just emerged in the last few months. So there's definitely excitement around what we could do together. Another way that we've been answering that question of what more might we do together has involved building on the relationships and structures that already exist in this institution, that is the United Methodist Church. Despite the conflicts and challenges of this particular moment in our church's history, the denomination is still a rich web of talented people and well-equipped organizations, from the local church through the boards and agencies. And so we're asking, how might we put all of that, those connections, those resources, those people to good use at this time of planetary crisis? Towards that end, we've created training for organizing in your local church. We've supported annual conference teams and brought annual conference leaders together in jurisdictional networks. And as you'll hear in a moment, there's plans in the works to offer model resolutions and to support you as you might have conversations with your bishops. In a sense, we're just making use of the existing web that is the United Methodist Church, to those relationships, connections, and resources, and figuring out how we might put them to good use. So finally, before I turn it over to the other work team leaders, I also want to share a bit about the work of the communications team, because that's one I've spent the most time with. One of the first things we realized we needed to do in creating this movement was to build some ways for us to communicate, connect, to update each other, learn from each other. And so we created a website, and that website, umcreationjustice.org, is a place where you can learn a lot about the movement. Like I said, you can see all of the work teams there. You can see links to all of the annual conference teams that we're aware of, and jurisdictional connections, as well as board and agency resources. There's 2 newsletters that goes out, one on the first of the month with general updates from the movement, generally has a theme, and that has events and resources and so forth. And the other going out on the 15th of the month with Creation Justice tips that are practical things you can do, tips you can put into your newsletter and your bulletin, that kind of thing. The website is evolving. And so if you think of, there's also a growing resource body for worship and music resources, as well as just a running connection of inspiring stories from across the connection through the blog that also gets shared in the newsletter. So I will put a number of these links into the chat, but I want to now, I guess, turn it to some of the other work team leaders. And I didn't warn them what order we'd be doing this in. So I think I'll do that now so folks kind of know when they're coming up. They've all generously been giving them their time in these work teams and agreed to come as well today to tell you a bit about what they're working on. We'll have Karin Mickelfish, then Christina and Paul, who are Karin will be talking about annual conference organizing and the model legislation. Christina and Paul talking about policy and advocacy. Pat and Bob about local church organizing, and then I will give a little bit of a final update about the worship team, which I'm not part of, but I have an update from them. So that's the order we're going to go in. They're going to give you a brief introduction to what they're working on, and then they will have a breakout group. So as you listen to each of them, think about who you want to go hang out with a little longer. They're not going to give a formal presentation in the other group, but it is an opportunity for us to just get a little get to know each other a little more and ask questions. So that's how we'll determine the breakout groups. So I think I'm ready. I'm going to turn it over to you, Karin. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Kathy. So I'm Karin Mickelfish, and I chair the annual conference organizing team. And as the name implies, we help to both organize and strengthen annual conference teams on creation care. And as part of that work, we have a series of webinars that a number of folks, Dan Duranko, Pat Watkins, and a few others were instrumental in creating, that help a team as it's forming to go through the steps of identifying who should be a part of the team, what resources are available to them, how they might organize themselves, and how they might move forward from there. We also have facilitated jurisdictional meetings, which are quarterly gatherings of members of annual conference teams and others interested in their jurisdiction to be able to share best practices, activities that they're working on, challenges that they may have, just to be able to share information and to do it on a geographical basis. When the bishops, the Council of Bishops in November of 2021 made a statement reaffirming the pastoral letter from 2009, God's Renewed Creation, they committed to renewing their efforts towards climate care, creation justice. That helped us to start focusing on meeting with our bishops in sort of a two-prong approach. Our current bishops, and working with them on how that might be implemented, including net zero work in each of the annual conferences, much as the boards and agencies have done, but also developing some questions for our Episcopal candidates prior to our jurisdictional conferences, so that those folks who were up for possible election as bishops, we had an opportunity to query as to their stance on climate care, on creation justice. Out of our work there, we also then started to think about how we might approach our annual conferences with resolutions. So we have a working group working on model resolutions, which will be very soon ready. In fact, that working group meets this afternoon, and those will be available on our website and through the next newsletter. And our hope is that annual conferences will take those, maybe one, maybe several. There will be, I think, 7 or 8 total. So I don't anticipate that every annual conference will want to do all 8, but to pick and choose model resolutions that they may want to then utilize within their own annual conference. So, so those are some of the things that our annual conference organizing team is working on. And let's see, do I turn it to Christina and Paul next?
That's good. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I'm Paul Slentz, and I'm going to be reporting on behalf of Christina and myself. I'm a retired pastor in the Tennessee Western Kentucky Conference, and Christina is in the, I believe it's the Great Rivers Conference in Illinois, and also works very much with the United Women in Faith in the North Central jurisdiction, and is also staff for the Illinois and I believe Wisconsin now. I'm not sure about that, but the chapter of Interfaith Power and Light, which is called Faith in Place. So we co-convened this group. There were 2 advocacy working groups that were started back in 2019 out of a conference that was held in Nashville, an annual gathering that had been going on for many years of United Methodists, for about 12 years, I think, at that point. And it was just decided that we wanted to have something that was more, maybe more formalized and maybe a little more organized moving forward. And so that's where the United Methodist Creation Justice movement really got its start. And although it had been building for many years, and out of that came 2 advocacy working groups, one that focused on federal policy, mainly climate policy, and the other that focused on state policy and local policy, just directed towards creation justice in general. So those 2 groups were started, and basically the premise was that we strongly believe that a lot of harm that comes to creation and also a lot of good in protecting creation is a result of what public policies are in place at all levels of government, and that in order to affect that in a positive way, we need to be engaged with shaping public policy. So that's kind of the premise of our work. In the first couple of years, we did some webinars, basically on training sessions on effective advocacy, again, at all levels. We also a group would meet either monthly or every couple of months to talk about what legislation was moving, especially at the federal level, and then we would come out with recommendations that were for action that were put in the newsletter. An example of that was that for the January newsletter, we asked people to submit comments to the EPA's rule that's coming up on methane emissions. In 2022, just to give some example of our recent work, we really focused on the getting some legislation through Congress that would deal with the reduction of emissions related to climate change in a just way, and really worked hard on that. There were lots of fits and starts. A lot of groups were working together on that, and finally, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed back in August, and though it has many things that are not perfect about it, it is the first really big commitment by the federal government to address climate change, with $375 billion set aside for that. And also, importantly for churches, it gave churches the first time an opportunity to benefit from various incentives that were available to other organizations, but not to nonprofits and not to churches, to weatherize and to provide greater energy efficiency in their places of worship. So we worked really hard on that, and we're happy to see that pass. Looking forward to 2023, we're going to be meeting next week to talk more about this. But we're going to continue to probably offer some webinars on effective advocacy. We're also going to be doing, looking to try to influence legislation at the federal level, particularly related to funding for lower wealth countries to help them address climate change. Some of you may be aware that at COP27 in Egypt, that a special fund was set aside to deal with what's called loss and damage, and we will be lobbying our government to pay a fair share towards supporting that. We will also be working to work for a fair and just full and just implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act as that unfolds, and wanting to make sure that has a very positive impact on lower income communities and communities that have suffered the most in this country related to climate change and other forms of pollution. And also, we will want to provide opportunities for local people in local churches to learn how they can take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act. We will continue to press the executive branch to take good actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other forms of pollution, such as the Department of Energy, again, the Environmental Protection Agency, and others that have some role in that. So we're going to be busy, and looking forward to a good year, and certainly invite anybody who wants to be part of that to let us know, and we'll be glad to get you involved. And if you go into our small group, I think Christine is going to take more of the leadership in that. So I think that's it. And I can't remember who to pass it to next. Is it Pat and Bob, maybe? I'm not sure.
So I'm Pat Watkins. I'm retired United Methodist clergy in North Carolina and retired missionary through Global Ministries. I was a missionary assigned to the care of God's creation. And even though I'm retired, I will always and forever call myself a missionary to the earth. I love that title. So that's who I am. I'll just say briefly, my piece of the work in terms of the local church task force, and I think Bob can fill in a whole lot more about that. But my favorite piece, and the piece that I've been able to contribute, is biblical theology. And so for me, convincing United Methodists that creation care is part and parcel of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ is quite a passion for me. And if I can convince people because as y'all know, not everybody is motivated by climate change or other environmental problems. And so if I can motivate people based on a good, solid biblical theology, people that are in the local church who might not be into climate change, but if I can appeal to them on the basis of theology, then maybe I can contribute to enlarging the movement and enabling more people to join this movement. So that's just one piece of the local church work that we're doing. So Bob, fill us in on the rest of it. Thanks.
Okay. Actually, I'm sure there's a lot more going on in terms of involving the local church in environmental stewardship. But one direct route that we're taking within the climate or the creation justice movement was the development of an advanced training course for the lay servant ministries program. Through lay servant ministers, the church enables the lay folks to get involved in ministry of various sorts, everything from music to education, to work with youth, to work in mission programs, to it's a whole bunch of things. And one of the things we thought was lacking was some program to help involve local churches, establish green teams, and really sign up to engage in environmental stewardship. So over the last 3 or 4 years, this started as I actually started as my Earthkeeper project back in 2016, which was initially aimed just at our local conference. But over the last 4 years, through expansion, working with a team of 7 people scattered around the country, we've put together a program called Loving People and Planet in God's Name, or in the Name of God, depending on which version you look at. And that course has been certified through Discipleship Ministries. And Chris and I are going to be briefing the Association of Conference Directors of Lay Servant Ministries, their 2023 convocation on January 28th, at which point we expect this course to be certified and available for use throughout the denomination. And Pat is being modest. One of his major contributions, many of you probably have been involved in Mission U at some point in the past. Pat edited the climate justice book that was used in that course, in the Mission U course back in 2016 and 17. As we were putting together this Loving People and Planet, we talked about the need for a text that covered a wide variety of topics. We can't have people read 5 different texts in order to cover 5 different subject areas. Pat's book, because it is a compendium of 8 chapters that basically run the gamut from theology to practical application to what the Methodist Church is doing. We use that book starting in the first, that's been the text. But one of the things that Pat and the authors have done over the last year in preparation for this course is editing and bringing up to date that book. And we now have the 2nd edition available. It's available already through United Women in Faith. And we hope eventually for the course to have a digital version also, so that people don't necessarily have to purchase a hard copy. And that's basically where we're going. We hope that'll be off and running by the end of the month.
Thanks, everybody, for sharing those. And there's a couple of work teams that aren't represented with leaders today, although some of you may be involved in these groups, and I just haven't seen your names there yet. But there's a new work group on worship that is currently working on a whole series of Eastertide / Earth Month worship resources, particularly for the 6 weeks between and not including Easter and Pentecost, is what is written on in my description. And so the theme for that will be Life Breaks Forth. And that will be a lectionary. It will be based on lectionary gospel readings, and they'll be also including a hatchling as an example, a living creature example for each week to illustrate the themes of Scripture. And so they're looking for folks to help provide sermon starters, as well as help develop other resources, liturgy and music and so forth. And so Laura Baumgarten is one of the coordinators of that group. And so her contact information, along with all of the other work teams, will be in the chat here in a moment. If that group is something you're interested in working on, or you know someone who has particularly worship, that's their way of showing up in this movement right now, I will encourage you to check that out. Finally, Jonathan Brake was not able to be here today, but I wanted to point out two things that he's deeply involved with that are really fundamentally supportive of this movement. And one is, of course, the Earthkeeper program. Many of you are either Earthkeepers or maybe have heard of that. You're encouraged either to sign up if you haven't become an Earthkeeper yet, or know someone who would be interested. I know that the next training is coming up March 10th through the 25th. And the deadline to apply is February 13th. So there is more information about that in this link that I'm plopping here in the chat. And then part of the Earthkeepers, and one of the resources that Global Ministries has offered to the movement, is something that is called the Creation Care Network, not to be confused with the Creation Justice Movement. I know those are confusing, but the Creation Care Network is an actual online platform that is kind of an internal social media space, you might say, as more of a metaphor, I should say. It's really a place for us to share resources, events, questions, stories. You can find, there's a map there, so you can find other people in your region, and you can see the projects that other people are working on, particularly the Earthkeepers all have to now put their projects there. So there is the link to that group, encourage that network, that platform, encourage you to go there. And we're increasingly going to be trying to put all of our work teams and our jurisdictional teams to that platform. So it's another place to get connected and find each other. I think that that is really what we had in mind to share. In short, I'm just really grateful that you found us, that you're here. We look forward to connecting with you further. We want you to definitely reach out, ask questions, know what you're working on. As I mentioned, there's some other way that you either want to get involved that we don't already have a group, or some way that you'd like to get supported. Let us know. There's probably somebody else with that same question or interest. And we're just really grateful that God's working through you at this time and through the church to bring about healing and restoration. And so thanks for showing up and adding your energy to that work. I'm going to turn it back to Rashinda to direct us on the next part of this.
So we just want to give an opportunity for some questions because this has been a lot, and I know many of you are like, this is, oh yeah, you're involved in so many layers of this. But for others, like, whoa, how do I sort through that to plug in what I'm really feeling called to do? And I hope you also get a sense of possibilities. So if you're not hearing something today that you're really feeling called for or to, reach out, because there may be somebody already doing that and we just haven't mentioned it, or it may be an opportunity to do something new. So this is a movement. It's like pretty cool, like a mustard seed in real life. We talk about that a lot, but every once in a while we get to see one. So does anybody have a question that you'd like to ask? But we're going to go into breakout rooms next, but you might need to clarify, like, in order to know where you want to land for the breakout room based on what the folks have just shared, leading those breakout rooms have just shared. Yes, thank you.
A question I have is, all of these teams sound like they're doing really interesting work. Is there a way that what they're doing is going to be posted? So even if we're not on that team or working on that directly, we can find out what's happening?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Judy. Well, first of all, if there's a particular team that you just want to be kept in the loop on, I know that they'd be happy to add you to their email lists and send you notes for meetings. But one of the goals, at least one of my goals, is that I'm hoping that all of the leads of each team will start to post their updates in the Creation Care Network, so that will be a place as well. The January newsletter gave updates kind of as of this moment. So you can be kind of up to date with where things are at right now with that January newsletter, and I'll plop that into the chat.
Welcome back, everyone. I can tell by the slow comeback that folks are still chatting and waiting for that very last second. Always a good sign. Welcome, welcome. Hurrah. Good to see everyone. Here we all are again.
Caught me mid-sentence.
I'm sorry,
That's
say
all
that
right.
again?
Oh, just caught me mid-sentence.
Oh, yes.
That's okay. No worries.
That's a great sign. Do you want to finish your sentence here?
Well, I was just sharing that with John's, let's see, John Stoltzberg, yeah, from Stoltensberg from Madison, Wisconsin, just sharing how the kind of the process for deciding what legislation to support at the federal level. Yeah, and that we have some guiding principles that are actually, the guiding principles are actually on our website. And Kathy could probably say where to find those, because I can't.
I will put a link in the chat right now. Thanks, Paul.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know those of us involved in like IPLs or other kinds of, it's like that question kind of pops up around this time. What are we about at the top levels to support? Welcome to everybody. Okay, so we are at the home stretch. Just so crazy glad to have had the opportunity to work with this big movement, just that they let me in to work with them is just marvelous, and to see all of you and to feel a little less alone. And I hope all of you are experiencing that, not just a little less alone, but also the scope of plans that you can be involved in, that you can create, that you can learn from. I feel like anyway, I'm listening and learning and really grateful for that. So our close will be basically, so Dawn, I think you rolled there, you are. So Dawn's gonna kind of lead us into a little bit of a reflection of how that went for you, and then we'll have a closing prayer. So go ahead, Dawn.
Okay, well, once again, I just want to reiterate how much we appreciated everybody coming and sharing. I mean, this, as we all know, climate change is, as I said before, challenging, and just being able to have people to share faith and share hope and kind of work virtually shoulder to shoulder on this really important issue is really important. So I think we just, if anybody wants to just just share out a little bit about if they want to share anything right now about the breakout room, or just about anything they want to add before we do close out, if you can just let us know by raising your hand, that would be great. And then I think we can probably just let you go until next time. So anybody want to have anything to say? I don't see anybody. So Rashina, you want to just close us out with a prayer?
Okay, and you know where to find us if you do have a question or something to follow up with. Next Movement Cafe will be the third Wednesday, so this coming February, and we will talk with Jonathan Brake at that Movement Cafe and really dig into what does it mean to be a Earth Keeper and what that's all about. And then the following week, we're going to be talking about discipleship. So check out the page and see what's upcoming. And I really hope to see all you back. Spread the word, because this is good work. So February 15th, as Kathy is there. So as our closing prayer, I just want to read the first little bit of Psalm 1. I'm a forest girl, and people who know me have heard me tell the stories of me growing up wild range in the forests of Canada, and how formative that was for me as a very young girl, just being free to roam. Gen X, we were kind of tossed out into the wilderness, and we had great fun. And imagine my joy in coming to the Psalms once I learned to read, and discovering a tree in Psalm 1. And so I'm just going to read the very first part of that as our closing prayer. The truly happy person doesn't follow wicked advice, doesn't stand on the road of sinners, and doesn't sit with the disrespectful. Instead of doing these things, these persons love the Lord's instruction, and they recite God's instruction day and night. They are like a tree replanted by streams of water, which bears fruit at just the right time, and whose leaves don't fade. Whatever they do succeeds. And with that, my Wesley Bible, I offer farewell blessings to all of you and gratitude to share this space and an invite to come next time round. Thank you so much.